In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Marianne's guests are leaders in their field, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in their own work. They teach others to develop, refocus, and grow. Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. And remember, make every moment count.
Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I am so excited we're going to be spending this time here today. We've got such a great show lined up. Our first guest is just hands down an amazing lady. She is the show host of the PBS Emmy-nominated show, The Whitney Reynolds Show. And she also has a weekly show, a radio show that she does that's called Weekly Women that spotlights female entrepreneurs that give back. So let's welcome to the show, Whitney.
Hi, it is so great to be with you.
Oh my goodness, it's so great to spend this time with you. I know that you just have so much on your plate. You're, this is a highly successful show host with PBS. You've got two amazing, beautiful children. So I'm sure your plate is completely full.
Yeah, well, and we have a 12-year-old Shih Tzu. I always say that was my first child. So between managing the dog with a bad back, a husband, and 2 kids, and my first baby at the talk show, it has been a little wild around our house. I call it the Heiner Zoo, which is our married name. So it is just a zoo around here.
You know, Whitney, I'm so excited that you're here today to talk to us about how to use your platform to help others. So how did you find your calling?
You know, it was something that was laid on my heart at a very, very early age. And I always joke around that, you know, like other girls in the neighborhood were dressing up as their latest princess that they saw at Disneyland or something like that. And for me, I was pretending to be Sally Jessa Raphael, like in my living room, wearing the blonde wig, borrowing my mom's glasses. And it was something that I just knew I would do. So I would conduct interviews like a little 6-year-old in the living room, get any neighbor that would let me sit down and interview them. But it was a turning point for me growing up in such, I'm sure a lot of the listeners remember the early talk shows that were a little bit more racy, the who's your dad, who's your mom, who's cheating on who, and that was a lot of the talk shows that I grew up watching. And I knew that wouldn't be what I would do. So in like middle school, I thought maybe a morning show would be my calling. But then something happened in middle school and high school, and it was the Oprah revolution, where Oprah took a lot of trash TV to class TV, and it became stories more that people needed to hear, and it became people that would come on because they actually were on a mission to help others, or it was some type of disease that no one knew about, and that needed to be heard. And so when I saw that start to happen, and I saw this, you know, the talk show world changing to a very different type of mission, I said, that is what I'm going to do. Now, you sometimes have to do stuff to get to where you're going, and it was not overnight for me where I was just like, okay, I'm going to step into this platform where I am going just to be dedicated to topics that are helping people, because that did not happen for me overnight, nor could you just go to school and say, okay, I'm going to do this, because the reality is that kind of TV doesn't always start out making money, and there's not really just a show that does that. So I went into traditional news, and then I did around the town type of talk show to get my feet wet. But I knew that moment that I would hit my ratings and I would get my platform where I could do this type of show, I would. So I really stepped into it about 4 years ago when we made the move to PBS.
Oh, well, I'm a big fan of yours. And for our listeners that maybe are just new to your show, which I don't think there are many of those people out there, what is your program and what is it all about?
So we are the Whitney Reynolds Show, and we air in several different PBS markets. We are a woman-owned talk show, which is very interesting. People get very confused about that because most shows are owned by the network. And when I want to say it's probably like 23 or 24, I had started this online talk show, and I just would interview people around Chicago, and it was still in news, and I went ahead and started this online thing, seeing if it would gain traction, and sure enough, it did. And so when I started this talk show, all of a sudden I got in this meeting where they're like, you can have your own talk show, but you still need to own it. And I'm like, own it? How does that even happen for a 23 or 24-year-old? But somehow we did it. And not only did we do it, but we grew our brand. And, you know, the social media, you're saying, you know, a lot of people follow our twins or our family and even the show on social media. And with that, social media is, I would say 99% of the way my show got out there in front of people, and the way our branding got in front of, you know, all these different markets that we weren't even in, because people started watching through the social channels. So we started the talk show. It ended up getting picked up by NBC nonstop. And about 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to step into my full vision. And that's whenever we moved to PBS, and now we're in Chicago and the Quad Cities, and then we're just kind of picking it market by market. And the road that most people travel in the TV world is nothing on the road I'm on. We're still on a very unique road. Some people do syndication. I would love to go that route, but for us, it's always been doing what works for us and identifying what that is and growing it that way. So I still call every new market. In fact, today I was on the phone with 2 different markets, and I said, hey, you know, you should pick up the Whitney Reynolds show. And it cracks me up because they're like, oh, we really like this Whitney girl. And I'm like, well, that's a good thing, because that's me. I still
You're talking to her.
Yes, exactly. So it's been a very hands-on approach, but it has been very untraditional, but it's been a lot of fun to get to where we're going. And we're not there yet. That's the thing. We still have a long way to go. So.
Well, and I think that's so important. A lot of people now are looking for what makes them happy, you know, and so I think it's so important that you are, you know, taking the route that you are and choosing the markets that work for you, you know, and doing it that way, you know, because overall, I heard this quote one time. It's like, success without fulfillment is failure, and it's like, ooh. That's pretty much right.
Well, and that is the truth of it, you know, but I always tell people you can't get where you can't always have that fulfillment overnight. Like sometimes, like part of my story was doing that morning anchor job in market 161 to get to a point where I knew how to talk on television. And that's what I think, you just have to keep the end goal and kind of like yearly goals in sight to say, okay, like, how do we get there? Well, okay, maybe we do it this way, but also doing what works for you, but following that overall calling is huge. And I would say anybody that's even listening right now that feels like, oh, I'm doing a job that's not near my calling, well, you should go home and reevaluate, because we're here to make our mark, you know?
Well, I agree with you 100% on that. And then we can definitely talk about that quite a bit, but I have some other questions here for you. And I know you talk about these tough topics. And so what inspires you to do that?
Well, when I'm watching TV, I see a lot of junk news. Sometimes it's not even that it's not real news, but I'm like, why are we talking about this? And there's so many issues that get emailed in. And this was happening whenever I was being the around the town type talk show host, where I'd all of a sudden have something come across my desk or in my email that I was like, whoa, I had no idea this exists. Or I had no idea this exists in my city. So I had an email, I remember when I first started my talk show, and it was about sex trafficking. And I was thinking, oh, this is happening in another country. And the more I started scrolling down, I said, this is happening 6 blocks away from my house. And this is one of the busiest sex trafficking areas in Chicago. I could not believe it. And that's when I knew there are so many things happening around us that we just aren't paying attention to, or they're not being brought up to our attention. But whenever we actually hear them, we become open to knowing what's really happening in our world and how we can make our difference.
And I applaud you for sharing these kinds of topics, because a lot of times, just like how you said at the beginning of that, it's like, wow, that's in another country, and it's not. It's in our backyard. a lot of these things that are going on is happening right here. And so when we have awareness of it, we're able to go ahead then and learn more about it, and that's how differences are made.
Well, and like the story after story that we do now, it is, I leave my studio just almost with chills of like, how did I not know about this? Or how is this girl's story? We had someone that was attacked with acid. I mean, how does that even happen? Like, who attacks someone with acid? And she was someone's daughter. She was someone's sister, and she had gone through this. But you know what? She is turning her story to help others. And those are the kind of people we have come in and out of our studio that have lived, they've learned. And, you know, the sad part is sometimes there's not an overall solution to what we're talking about, but at least it's raising the eyebrows of like, okay, this is going on and we need to know about it.
Yeah, without a doubt. So overall, how do you see that your platform is helping others?
Well, there's several different ways. One is what I was saying earlier. It's raising awareness for topics that need to be heard. Provoking positive change through media is a big one because I feel like so many different media outlets waste their time, their airtime talking about nonsense, and really we can be uplifting each other. You know, elevating others, I always say, like, there is enough pie for everyone. And people say, oh, Whitney, shouldn't you be worried about, like, oh, this new talk show or this new person? And really take pride in who you are. And that's what I always tell people is, like, take pride in what God's given you. Because when we start evaluating what we've been given, that's when we're really able to open up the door to help others with those talents. So we elevate others with our topics, with our show. I do a ton of giving back in Chicago, and there is something that is just precious about helping others. And I say giving is really just good for the soul. Like, people do it, they think they're helping others, but really giving of your time, giving of your resources is such a gift that you give yourself, not even in a way knowing it. So it is just one of those things that I feel like is ingrained with me personally, is just helping others, because life is too short not to go about that. Going back to just your question about elevating others, it is something that I feel like we have the choice to do daily. And so many times we're caught with what's going on in our own world that we might not realize our neighbor that's hurting, or the person in line that would just had like enough change to get their meal. And if we just open our eyes to what's going on around us, then it's kind of this aha of we can make our mark in really big ways. We can create a talk show, right? That's a really big way. We can reach millions that way. But we can also do it in our daily lives, when we're walking to the bus, when we're, at the grocery store. There's so many different ways. And I just feel like if we can, hone in on being that positive impact for ourselves and for others, it would be in a different world we live in.
What do you think are some of the some really good ways that people can make an impact within their own community? I mean, obviously you've got this award, winning show, and it's not everyone's path to walk that. What are some tips you think you can give our listeners to, start to make impacts in their communities? My husband, as much as, I am a talk show host, so I love to talk, but just having conversations. So many people are on their phones. I love social media, but there is a time to tuck my phone away and realize when I am at the gym and I'm just washing my hands before I go out and do some weightlifting or something, there's a woman next to me. I could say, hi, hope you're having a good day. Or when I'm dropping off my kids somewhere, just engaging. What I've learned is people think because Chicago is such a big city, they're like, oh, it's a big city, so much is going wrong with it and all this. But that's not the Chicago I know. The Chicago I know is the type that there's a man that we pass every day on our walk to the gym and back that would sit on this bench and he would talk to people. Well, he ended up passing away this last Christmas. And on that bench, there's a wreath. Now, who made that wreath for him with his name on it? It was neighbors. And it's because people engaged in conversations. And I feel like when we're so fast moving these days, going, to and from with our heads down, just trying to get through, that we lose that, conversation just with knowing what's going on around us. And when we just say hello to someone, it's amazing what can unfold. Yeah. I mean, there's such a world out there, and I think your show really helps people to get to know what else is happening in our world and develop more compassion. Now, when you made your show, and we know it was kind of, gosh, you've been inspired since a child, what made you want to help others through the show?
Well, a lot of it has to do with my faith, and I don't want to get on this whole holy roller thing on this show, but because that's not really the whole part of it. I just knew that if I were to be given this platform, and when I say given, it didn't mean I didn't work, but so many people are good in this industry. So many people have big dreams and visions, and I knew I was one of them. So I knew if I had the opportunity and I landed what I always dreamed of, that my mission would be to give back through my talk show. And it would be to highlight these things that need to be heard, or these issues that need to be seen. And, they're not always the sexiest topics, and that's what I tell people. Very rarely do we do a sexy topic. I think woman entrepreneurs is probably the closest we get to one of those kind of topics that you're like, oh, that's, but because a lot of the topics are very hard. A lot of them you might not want to watch. And it was really interesting because when I first started my show, we made the change to PBS. We were told that we had a certain time slot. And then all of a sudden, the week before we aired, we got thrown at 5 a.m. for my first series. And I am thinking 5 a.m. with these topics are just going to be the rudest awakening for people. So that lasted a season, and now we're on at 6:30 in the evenings, which is really nice. We're here at 6:30 in Chicago and 7:30 in the Quad Cities in the evening. But it really is one of those things that the topics we do are heavy, and you kind of need to digest them. And it's not a morning thing. It's not like grab your coffee and have a great day. Even though we always have a very positive spin on a lot of the topics, or we have resources to find out more, it's still very heavy things. So, but they're also really inspirational shows too. We have The Power of Influence coming up in our spring, and that one I've just been watching and play back, and I'm very proud to see the mentors that were in our studio that stepped up and are really making an impact in the next generation.
Yeah, there's so many great, wonderful people out there, and you included. And so looking back in this last few years that you've had, what's one of the shows that has really stood out for you?
Well, I would have to say our Emmy-nominated show, which was on veterans, and it wasn't your typical veterans show. And that's the backstory behind that is kind of why our show is different, because we don't take a normal topic and just do it the way other people are doing it. We take it and put a different type of spin that makes people think differently about it. And so our whole veteran show was how to honor our vets when they come back from serving, how to integrate them back into society after being so far removed for so long, and how we do that in a graceful way and get them back to work, get them working through some of the issues that they've seen. And so that was one that really hit home for me, because I had these men that had served that were strong and tough, and yet they were saying, like, it was hard to come home and just live life. And that one really opened my eyes. And that's something that we don't always see. It was, a lot of the time we focus on what's going on where they are fighting, but really one of the focuses needs to be on what we're doing when they come home. And so that was a show that's really been with me, throughout, that was a year ago, 2 years ago, and it's kind of stuck with me. And now whenever I talk with veterans or I see someone with dog tags, I have a whole different type of conversation with them, because it's a different focus. Another one was with a Holocaust survivor, and those survivors are fading because we're all getting older, and in the years coming up, there won't be many survivors left. And to sit down with this brave woman that shared her story and share these details that, hopefully no one would have to see in our lifetime. And that's another story that needed to be heard, because the reality is those stories are vanishing with age. So that was another one that really stuck with me.
Oh, and so many more, I'm sure. What do you see for this next season coming out? What do we have to look forward to? Because I always know you've got some great stuff lined up.
Yeah, so the Power of Influence show is really great because we do address the issue in Chicago, which I'm sure, a lot of people that are listening to this right now are thinking, because Chicago, when it's highlighted in the news, it is a lot of gangs. Even President Trump was talking about sending in the National Guard. There is a major issue here in Chicago, but it was really nice because we had a man that is from Chicago that moved to Texas and is actually mentoring kids, taking them out of the bad neighborhoods, helping them be removed from the gang. And it's a very interesting look because in the show I asked, is this the only solution, is to remove people from Chicago, these gang members? And I want everyone to watch that show. So I don't want to give it away, like what unfolds, but we also Skyped with the teenager that was in the gang that was removed. And it is amazing what he says and what his solution would be for it. So that's a really powerful one coming up. We always do a life story. The people we pull for those that is just like the Holocaust survivor. We always pull amazing people that have a story that needs to be heard. We have a breast cancer story coming up. That's the non-removal of the breast. There is no surgery needed. It's a new procedure. We have the doctor that helped invent it, and also a lady that company helped invest in this procedure. She actually needed the procedure, so she was already running this company that little did she know would impact her own life and save her own life. So we have a lot of stuff coming up that's really powerful.
Lots of great things coming from you, Whitney. I cannot wait for this next season. And I'm so glad that we were able to spend this time here today. Thank you so much. Before we go, where can our listeners connect with you?
So the best place to watch our show, if you're not in Chicago or the Quad Cities or in Pittsburgh, it would be WhitneyReynolds.com. You can also find us on Facebook under The Whitney Reynolds Show, or you can follow me at Whitney Reynolds, and on Twitter, Whitney Reynolds as well.
Oh, well, thank you for taking the time to be with us here today.
Well, thank you for having me. And Marianne, seriously, thank you for all you do putting out positive messages. It was an honor to be on your show.
Oh, well, I mean, you just made my day. My goodness. Coming from you, that's a high compliment. Thank you so much. And we're going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. Our next guest is here today to talk to us about the power of meaning. She's the author of The Power of Meaning, Crafting a Life That Matters. She writes about culture, relationships, psychology, and her writings have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, the Atlantic Journal, and tons of other publications. So help me welcome to the show, Emily Esfahani Smith.
Marianne, it's great to be with you.
Oh, it's so great to spend this time with you. Now, I know your book has hit like -- bestseller, and a lot of people are just diving into this book. It's had so many people rave about it. I have to ask you, as we kind of get started here, what brought the inspiration to not only investigate like the meaning of the power of meaning, but the inspiration for this book as well?
I think that there's really two answers to that question. The first is I had a little bit of an unusual childhood. I grew up in a Sufi meeting house. So Sufism is a school of mysticism that's associated with Islam. And my parents ran the meeting house out of our home, which meant that twice a week, Sufis would come over and spend several hours sitting on the floor meditating. And the point of their practice was to kind of diminish their sense of self and grow as close to possible as God. So meditating was one way that they did that. Another way was acts of loving kindness, practicing loving kindness and doing acts of service. So I was surrounded by people who were leading meaningful lives, and I think that left an impression on me. And as I got older, though, I began to wonder if you had to have some kind of spiritual or religious practice to lead a meaningful life. So at around the same time that I was thinking about these questions, I noticed that our culture had this obsession with happiness and that the good life was taken to be a happy life. And yet I knew so many people, and I had grown up knowing so many people who didn't put happiness as their goal, but put meaning as their goal. And so I wanted to investigate that more deeply and see what it meant to lead a meaningful life.
Well, and I think that it's important to have that discussion because I know you've done a ton of research on this book. It was so well written. It's easy to see why people are raving about it. But there's that discussion, happiness versus meaning. And can you go over that a little bit for our listeners?
Absolutely. So we tend to use the terms happiness and meaning interchangeably. So if you think about, what we want in our lives, we'll say, I want to be happy, lead a meaningful life. But the fact is that even though you can be happy and experience meaning at the same time, you also have to choose which one of these two things you set as your goal and pursue, because they can be at cross purposes with each other. So happiness it's defined as a positive mental and emotional state. And activities that make you happy, research finds, are things like, sleeping in or, going to the movies, spending time on yourself. Whereas meaning is bigger. It's defined as connecting and contributing to something that is bigger than you are. So activities that make life feel more meaningful include things like cheering up a friend, meditating, reflecting on your values and on the trajectory of your life. And sometimes, we set meaningful goals for ourselves. We have some purpose that we're trying to realize, and those things are effortful and stressful, so they won't make us feel happy, but we do them because we think that they'll make our lives more meaningful.
Well, and I think having that distinction between the both of them really makes it easier for people to go, you know what, I might not feel like I can get into a place where I'm going to be happy, but I can find that meaning.
Exactly.
Now, I know that in your book you talk about the 4 pillars. And we're not going to go over all of them because, of course, the listeners need to go out and get your book, The Power of Meaning. But can you go over a couple of them for us?
Absolutely. So the pillars are what I found to be the building blocks of a meaningful life. So when I interviewed people and turned to the research, these were the 4 themes that came up again and again when they talked to me about what makes their lives meaningful. So one of them is a sense of belonging. The second one is purpose. The third one is storytelling. And the fourth one is transcendence, or experiences of awe. So I'll start with belonging because I think that's the pillar that is the strongest among most people. If you ask people, what makes their life meaningful, they tend to say their close relationships to others. Belonging, though, is not just about being in a relationship. It's about being in a particular kind of relationship, one in which you feel like you matter to others and are valued by others, and one in which you treat other people like they matter and like they're valued. So I think it's really important to know that belonging exists in moments between individuals, and that it's a choice. We can choose to invite people to belong by paying attention to them, by making eye contact with them, And we can choose to invite people to not belong, to reject them by, scrolling through our Twitter feed while they're trying to tell us about their day, or giving them the cold shoulder, or by giving them the silent treatment. And research shows that when we choose to invite people to belong, they actually rate their lives as more meaningful. And when we reject them, they rate their lives as less meaningful. And I think it makes sense, because when other people treat you like you matter, you feel like your life matters as well.
Well, and I know on your website you have a quiz that people can take so they can identify easily which pillar they fall under.
That's right. So no two people are going to necessarily have all 4 pillars of meaning in their lives, or necessarily have the same exact pillar of meaning. Different people are going to lean on different pillars to differing extents. So I created this quiz to help people figure out what their pillar is. Mine happens to be belonging and sometimes transcendence, depending on the day. So you can have 2 pillars. You can be really strong in all 4, but you don't need to have all 4 necessarily to lead a meaningful life.
Okay. And so what are some of the ways that people can find more meaning in their life? Some little tips for our listeners.
I think the first thing is to realize that we need to bring meaning down to earth. So we tend to think that meaning is this grand and esoteric pursuit, that you have to maybe find one meaning and purpose in your life in order to have a meaningful life. But the reality is that meaning lies in these 4 pillars, and that you can build up these 4 pillars in little ways, and that this will help your life feel more meaningful. So to take the example of purpose, one of the pillars, purpose is all about making some kind of contribution to the world around you. And so I like to tell people who are struggling with this pillar to think of one thing that they could do today to make one person's life better. And that doing some kind of act of kindness is a real way to build purpose. Another way is to realize that moments of belonging, the first pillar, that these are all around us. So if you're going to a grocery store and getting checked out, or if you're buying coffee from your local coffee shop, the people who are checking you out of the line, there's somebody you can have a conversation with, you can make eye contact, you can smile with. And these are small moments of belonging that are cultivated, but those people ultimately end up leaving them feeling elevated and like their lives are more meaningful. So I would encourage you just to think about how these pillars exist in your life, and what are small ways that you can build them up.
I think that those are perfect suggestions. Now, where can our listeners connect with you? I know you've got some events coming up, and one of them I actually think that would be fabulous if people are within the area that they can attend. You're going to be on a panel discussion for meaning and mindfulness in March. But where can our listeners connect with you?
So all of my events and the quiz and information about my book is available on my website, Esfahani.com. So my middle name is Esfahani. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook, and you can find me there as well.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. We greatly appreciate it, and this is the book to purchase if you're going to be taking a trip, you want to purchase The Power of Meaning, and really dive into this book.
Thank you very much, Marianne. It's been wonderful.
Well, thank you, Emily. It's been such a joy to have you on the show. Again, if you'd like to check out Emily's book, The Power of Meaning, Crafting a Life That Matters, it's available at all major retailers. And you can visit her on her website at emilyesfahanismith.com. Our next guest coming up is Dr. Susan Edelman. She's the Adjunct Clinical Associate Professor at Stanford University in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. She's a board-certified psychiatrist in private practice, specializing in women's issues. Dr. Susan is joining us today to talk about the new release of the new 50 Shades of Grey movie. And the question around this movie is it a sexy love story or a dangerous trend for women? And also, are we having the right discussion in regards to this movie? So I'm looking forward to diving into that with Dr. Susan. So glad that you all are going to be here to listen to this powerful discussion. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. You can reach me at mariannepistana.com. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. And we're going to pause here for a quick break, and we will be right back after these messages.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com. Ben Wexler is a gifted leadership development and strategy consultant for professionals who want to transform their organizations and careers. Through a uniquely personalized set of processes, participants discover their unique knowledge, how to leverage that knowledge and experience, and then put it all together with a global strategy. You're more valuable, your organization is more valuable, and the change is viral. Contact Ben at 630-881-1074. 630-881-1074.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. Our next guest, Dr. Susan Edelman, is here today to talk to us about the new 50 Shades of Grey movie, 50 Shades Darker. So Dr. Susan is an adjunct clinical associate professor at Stanford University in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. She's a board-certified psychiatrist in private practice, specializing in women's issues. She's here today to talk to us about 50 Shades of Grey. Is this a sexy love story or a dangerous trend for women? So welcome to the show, Dr. Susan.
Oh, hi, Marianne. Thank you so much for having me today. It's great to be with you.
It's so great to have you here. I mean, you are the go-to person in regards to relationships, and so I had to have you on, especially with the new 50 Shades Darker movie coming out. I mean, what is this saying to women and to our culture?
Oh, I'm so glad you're bringing this up, Marianne, because, you know, so many people are confused about this because on the surface, the books and movies might appear to be fantasy and fun, but as a psychiatrist and advocate for women, I'm so concerned about the devastating impact this phenomenon has had and is going to continue to have on women and our society because, excuse me, it isn't just a sexy love story, it's normalizing violence toward women.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you on that, and I think it's creating a new norm for, you know, a discussion that people have never had in regards to, you know, maybe, you know, having sex in a different way or having a sexy, intimate relationship.
Yes, and, you know, everybody is free to make their own sexual choices in the privacy of their bedroom, and you know, some people really get turned on by this and are trying to spice up their sex lives, and sexual issues can be really damaging for relationships. So you can understand that side of it, but we've got to really look at the big picture here because those people who were turned on by 50 Shades made it a big phenomenon, but I think the danger to women far outweighs any of the momentary titillation and pleasure that you can get for it. Because the more we start to see violence as normal, the more many women can't even differentiate when somebody has stepped over the line from harmless flirtation into sexual assault. And then it's even harder to say no because they don't even realize that there's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I agree with you 100%. I think, you know, everyone's talking about this movie, but, you know, are they having the right discussion about it? You know, in regards to how millennials and women of all ages first of all, perceive this, and the young men and the gentlemen going to see this, what they think is acceptable and it's okay.
I think you're so right. I think that we want to start having a different conversation about it, because part of the problem is so many people don't even really understand consent. And already our culture is so sexualized that casual sex has become a norm in some areas, and a lot of people are feeling like, what's wrong with me if I am not comfortable with casual sex, because it looks like it's the norm if you see it on TV and movies so much. And we don't want women thinking there's something wrong with them if they're not comfortable with casual sex. We're built for attachment. And we certainly don't want women to now think, well, maybe I'm a prude if I won't, go for this violent stuff. I don't think that's the message we want to be sending women.
And I think it's confusing enough, and I agree with you 100%, confusing enough as it is already, because I know you've talked about this, that there's so much pressure on women to be sexy and be sexual, and then there's these just outrageous statistics, like 60% of women are completely unhappy with their appearance. And so, so we've got, women that are kind of stepping into this and not sure, about their own, how secure they feel about themselves. They may go for something that they would pretty much rather, later on regret.
And they don't feel comfortable, first of all, saying no. They're afraid somebody's going to say they're a prude, maybe, or they are afraid people aren't going to believe them, which is really actually happening in a lot of areas. And here we are with the recent presidential election. I mean, this was huge, to have high-profile sexual assault charges on both sides of the political aisle. It has become so pervasive and so normalized that we talked about it at length when deciding who to vote for president.
And
so it's no wonder these girls don't get it, right?
Yeah, I mean, how could we? I mean, it's confusing. It's like, it's confusing enough as it is, and now this is becoming like a cultural norm, which is really, in my opinion, I think it's a little scary,
I'm worried, because I don't think we want this to become any more confusing than it already is for these young women, because these young women, here we are in a culture where we kind of make excuses for men. Well, he was drinking. He didn't mean to do that. And then we blame the women. Well, why did she have so much to drink? She asked for it. So that doesn't work very well in terms of women being able to say, hey, this is not okay what happened to me. These girls are scared to say anything, and sometimes they're not even sure what happened was wrong, because some of these acts are so pervasive.
And I think it could be really borderline, as you were saying earlier, in regards to, is this part of sexual play, or, it really gets into violence against women. And then from a cultural standpoint, what conversation should we be having with this?
Well, I think that this has opened the door for conversations about consent and, what is consent? Because ideally, you want someone to say yes, and that would be the green light to continue, and anything less than that should make both parties think. But how many people are going to understand that in a climate where this kind of sexual contact is tolerated? So I think this is the kind of thing. I think sometimes people don't understand what's on the other side. Like, why don't these women come forward? And, if they really think it was wrong, why didn't they do something about it? But the pressure is on women not to say anything. And if people are scared to talk, and especially if someone's powerful, then it's even worse, right? But even apparently in these colleges, there's a lot being written about sometimes the perpetrators of these crimes might be like big athletes, super important athletes to the college. So maybe the colleges aren't so interested in getting them in trouble or suspending or expelling them because it's going to mess up their football season or something. So then the women really have to and together even, because doing it individually doesn't work.
Mhm. Well, and there's a lot of insecurity and shame, and there's a lot of things that happen when someone's in a victim mentality that would prevent them from going to the police and saying, hey, maybe my husband or boyfriend and I were trying some new things out with the 50 Shades Darker, and, because that inspired us, and it just kind of went a little too far. You won't get people that will come up and start talking about that and saying, hey, but I'm so glad that this discussion's being had.
It's a very important discussion, and I think I just remember how I was, and a lot of other people at age 20, and, I wasn't the most assertive person. So here we're asking these young women to be super mature and very, very adult in trying to sort this unbelievably complicated problem out. And I think that's too much to ask. I think our society should really be taking a hand in trying to help with this, because we all know, everybody knows, authors and movie producers and the media world know sex sells. And when you have sex scandals so commonplace that they're even part of your election process, these media people have to go for even bigger shocks to get our attention, because we're kind of numb to the stuff we've already seen. So they don't necessarily have to consider the damage done to our society, because we keep paying for their books and movies. Look what happened with 50 Shades. I think it outsold Harry Potter.
Oh, wow.
So until we decide to say no to these harmful messages, we're just perpetuating this violence toward women.
And, and overall, it's like, what message are we sending to our young girls, in regards to, making this kind of thing normal, or having people grow up with this kind of an attitude. I think it can really get us into some dangerous territory regarding women and violence.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very sad situation. So the more we talk about this and really have conversations, I think the more we educate people that this isn't just harmless.
What are some thoughts that you want to leave our listeners on, maybe some tips in regards to if they are, choosing to go into, or maybe experimenting with this kind of a lifestyle, or maybe looking at, maybe it's been proposed to them, just some things that they can, keep in mind as they are moving forward?
I think one of the most important things in the books, of course, that were a big problem is that Anastasia had to sign this agreement that she wasn't going to talk to anybody about it. And how are you going to figure this out if you're a young woman confused about what's okay or not, if you can't run it by anybody else except the guy who, might be an abuser, right? So I think it's important for women not to sign up for that kind of an agreement, and to think about who they're comfortable sharing this kind of thing with, so that they can have someone else to bounce it off of. Because to really try and figure that out for yourself, and maybe feel ashamed or scared. If you're scared of the man, if you're scared he's going to be upset with you, if you tell anyone, then already you've got a little red flag going there, right? That you're not completely comfortable and safe with this guy.
And definitely something we need to get a handle on, and what this means for women and our society as a whole. So thank you for taking the time to be on the show here with us today, Dr. Susan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be able to share this with you and your audience.
I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in today. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.